Greetings, it's a Doth compiler and welcome to the Introduction to Blender for Game Developer series. In this video we will look through the Layout Workspace and its main tools, as well as the outlier area which is present in most of the workspaces. Great, so 3D viewport occupies the most of our screen. It is, let's say, our scene, our world. In this area we can see all the 3D objects created in this project, manipulate them, for example changing their transforms, and interact with them and the 3D scene itself for a variety of purposes like modeling, animating, texture painting, etc. As I have already mentioned in previous video, in case of layout, modeling and sculpting workspaces, the difference between them consists only of a different selected mode of a 3D viewport. We can change these modes in the top left corner. Here, there is a drop-down field there with the currently selected type. In layout, for instance, by default it says object mode. From the drop-down list we can select an edit mode, which will bring us the modeling workspace tool or sculpt mode for sculpting respectively. So the next area I would like you to have a look at is called an outlier. It is a hierarchical representation of our 3D world with a list of objects and collections that are treated as folders. As you can see, there is a main collection, a scene collection here, which is always present as the root of our hierarchy. Inside of it, there are other collections and objects. The outlier basically allows us to easily manage myriads of objects in order to have at least some order in the project. For example, you can shrink the content of the collection or an object so it does not occupy so much space. On the other hand, expanding its content by clicking triangles near its name. For example here, if I click that, shrinks. If I click that again, it opens up. Yeah, and any object here has this icon, so basically you can see what the objects consist of. For example, the cube has a mesh of a cube which has a material inside. It is also possible to disable a collection so that it is completely turned off. You can click a tick, a checkbox, near the collection name. Disabling it hides its instances on all the view layers. We will talk about those layers later. But for instance, an I button hides an object or a whole collection in the current view layer. Note that hiding an object within this button does not hide it from render, which is why we have a camera button here, and it removes the object from the render but does not hide it, for example, from our scene. As you can see, any object that is currently selected on our screen is highlighted with a blue background. For example, here it is a cube. Yeah, I can select camera or a light object by left clicking on it. But as you can see here, it is possible to see what objects are selected. In case you want to remove this possibility of selecting an object, you can go here to filters, expand it, and take this selectable option on. In my case it was already done, so I basically have this third icon here. You might not have it by default, so basically you will have to go here to filters and enable it over here so it appears in the list. Now, if I will untick it, I will no longer be able to select an object. One of the most important things here is that everything is in alphabetical order. But if you will drag and drop objects, for example here, I can grab a cube and drop it outside of our collection, I can change its parenting options. Yeah, the same way I can drop it anywhere inside. And the last thing here is, in case you will right click inside the outlier, it opens up a context menu where you can select, for example, a button to create new collection. And of course, double clicking on a collection or on an object allows you to change its name. To delete something, like for example a collection, you can select that in the outlier and press a delete button. Great, so we have two more areas inside of our layout workspace One of them is right beneath the outlier. It's called Properties area. It is the place where you can observe the data and manipulate different properties of the object. We will look through them one by one in the following videos where there will be need to use them. And another area that we have is a timeline, which is partly hidden beneath our 3D viewport. It is basically an area where we can define keyframes for animation and run it, for example, and we will of course look through that a bit later. So what I want us to focus on right now is in the 3D viewport. As most of the time we will be working here, so let's have a look at its regions, for example, the Layout Workspace. Yeah. So first of all, we have the main region. It is the most prominent part of the editor because it visualizes our scene. So basically everything that is visible on the screen right now, it's in the main region. At the top of it, there is a header. It's a small horizontal strip at the top of this area, sometimes could be at the bottom, depending on versions or your setup. All editors have header acting as a container for menus, and most commonly used tools, starting from, for example, workspace selection on the left, yeah, to the viewport shading options on the right. The toolbar on the left side of the editor area contains a set of interactive tools, and we would like to look at them more specifically. So the first tool that we have here on the list is a selection tool. For now it's a selection box, but if I hold, for example, left mouse button, we will see that there is a list of possibilities to select objects. My preferred one is selection box, but you may want to use selection circle or the lasso selection. Yeah, it depends just on your preferences. With the selection tool, I can just click on any object on our scene and it will be selected. Yeah, it will get this yellow outline on it. The next tool that we have in this group is the tool concerning the 3D cursor. 3D cursor, as you can see here, it is a red and white circle with a crosshair inside, the same thing that is in our scene and the origin of our world. This basically defines the place where a new object will be appearing. So, enabling this tool, I can click anywhere else and change the position of a newly created object. In case I want to get it back to the center of our screen, I can definitely try placing it somewhere. It might not be exactly position 0, 0. So for that, I can hold Shift S and select cursor to the world origin. Yeah, just drag your mouse to the correct option over here. And it will snap back to the origin. So the next group of tools that is the most important for us right now is concerning the changes of transforms of the object. So for example here, the next one is movement. So by enabling that, I will see gizmos appearing inside on our object. So basically if I select any other object, on its pivot, there will be gizmos appearing here. So what does it do? As it says from the name, movement, it just simply allows us to move the object. So basically right now, if I will hold the arrow, yeah, for example, the blue arrow, it will allow me to move my object top and down on our scene. The same goes to the green one and to the red one. Yeah. So basically, these arrows define axes on which we'll be moving our object. The same set of axes we can see here on the right top corner of our viewport. It displays direction of each of the axes. In case we want to move an object by more than one axis at a time, we can use those squares that we have here. So basically, this red square represents movement by all axes except the one of its color. So between the z-axis and y-axis, I'll be moving on them both, yeah, and on x-axis it will still stay at 0 position. In case I would like to move it in 3 axes at the same time, well, it may be difficult to achieve that, but I can drag, left mouse button click of course, and drag in the center of this white circle, and it will allow me to drag our object around the scene just parallel to the view of our virtual camera, yeah, of our screen. So now this way we define our own plane, let's say, of movement of the object. One important thing here, that if in case we moved an object somehow like this, we wanted to move it, for example, by the red square, we didn't, we clicked inside the white circle, so basically we're moving it freely perpendicular to our screen. So how to cancel this operation? Of course, I can drop the object and click Ctrl Z, but still it is possible to cancel any currently performing operation. So basically right now I'm still holding left mouse button, I didn't release that, and if I click right mouse button it will cancel the operation, so it snaps back. So the next tool that we have here on the list is a tool called rotation. So basically it works kind of similar to movement. We have those gizmos, each of them represents rotation on a specific axis. Yeah, so the blue one represents rotation around the blue axis, or the Z axis, yeah? And notice that in this particular case in Blender, Z axis going to the top, yeah, not the Y axis, but Z axis. So basically, if I target this specific circle and I move it, it will be able to move our cube, for example, around this selected axis. The same goes to any other of them. Basically, if I would like to once again rotate it freely around several axes, I can hold left mouse button click and hold, and of course drag our mouse to rotate it from inside the circle. So at some point you may miss any of these gizmos and just click somewhere near that and just get unexpected result. So in such case, know that you've missed the gizmo or the specific color that you wanted to click. Great. So the next tool that we have is about scaling. It looks similar to the move tool, yeah, but different ending of the arrows. So basically here, if I drag any of these gizmos once again of any color, it will allow me to scale on a specific axis like Z-axis, Y-axis, and X-axis, right? And here, once again, we have those squares. So if I drag, for example, this green square, it will allow me to scale on all axes except of the one of the selected color. So basically, in this case, it's green. So on the Y-axis, there will be no scaling. And once again, we have a huge blue white circle. So if I will press somewhere here inside the white circle, it will allow me to scale it uniformly on all 3 axes at the same time. Great. And the last tool that I would like to show you, which I really use, is called Transforms, which combines all the previous tools together. Whether you want to use that or not, it just depends on your preferences. In my opinion, it is much clearer and more visible to use each specific tool for each specific transform, if you are not using shortcuts, of course. So, right now, you can simply set up any basic scene using those basic default objects in our Blender. Of course, for now we have only cube, so I'll move it aside and show you how you can add more objects, because there is a whole list of them. For that, we'll have to go here, and at the top bar, or the head bar here of our viewport, we will see an add button. Of course, we can see the tooltip. The Shift 8 is a shortcut for this operation, so we can click on that and select any of the objects for our use. Yeah, of course, the meshes are simple objects that could be used for the creation of things like scenes, like setup, blockout probably. The other ones have more specific functionality, so basically for now, it is probably better to stick to using meshes. So mesh a plane, for example, and the plane will appear on our scene. Yeah, the same goes to any other object like cube, circle, UV sphere, icosphere, cylinder, cone, torus, and grid, or a monkey. So basically we can add a monkey model, which is here. So please play around with those tools before the next video, because everything here is really based on the correct usage of movement, rotation, and scaling. And now we'll go further. So the next region that we have here, as you can see, is the one displayed at the bottom left corner, like here, add monkey. For now, it says add monkey because the last operation I've done is I created a monkey object. So basically this region is called adjust the last operation. We can see we can open it up because by default it's closed. And here we can configure our previously made operation. For example, if I move it, the operation changes to movement and it displays how far away I have actually moved an object, on what axis, on which orientation, etc, etc. So basically, if you want, if you need that, you can always see what you've done. For example, adjust it manually. If you wanted to move it specifically like at 1.5, you can specify it here and it will adjust the object position accordingly, for example. And last but not least, there is one more region that is hidden by default. So basically, if you go here behind those axis preview, you will see a little arrow. So if you click on that, you will get a new window appearing. You can always also press N on the keyboard and it will also appear or hide depending on its current state. So basically here, there is a region containing panels with settings of objects within the editor and the editor itself. Yeah, so basically here we have transforms, the scale and dimensions of an object, of course, a selected object, yeah, and once again, it was not visible by default. So you make sure if you need that, for example, here is a quite nice tool to lock our camera to the viewport, yeah, to what we actually see from our render. So if you would like to use those tools, it is important to remember that they are hidden by default. The next thing that we have here is our viewport, which is really important in case of modeling. It is called transform pivot point. So basically, if you enable it up, if you open it up, you will see a list of reference points, which will be a reference point for our transforms, for example, for movement. By default, set to individual origins or the median point, but for example, we can change that to 3D cursor, which means that now, if I select any object with setting this mode to 3D cursor, I will get something like this. As you can see, the gizmos are appearing not on our object, but on our 3D cursor. For the purpose of movement, it is not that important, but for example for scaling, if you want to scale it uniformly around the center of the world, we can, because right now it scales relative to the 3D cursor that we have here. And the same goes about the rotation. So we can set up what we want, for example, individual origins. Selecting several objects will allow you to rotate them around itself. Yeah, but if you select median point and you will rotate these objects, you will rotate them around a middle point. The next important option close to that is called snapping. Basically enabling that, by default it is set to increment, and it means that for now, if I'll try to move our object, for example here, it will snap its position to each, as you can see, to the grid point. Yeah, so basically it increments it by 1, in this case on y-axis. So if you want to move exactly an object over an exact position, it would be better for you to enable snapping. Of course, apart from increments, there are other options like vertices, which for example will allow you to move an object and snap it to a specific vertex of the mesh. For example, here I'm snapping our monkey position to a specific vertex position on our plane. May be important when they are modeling and you want to adjust position of one object to the other, for example. Or of course, incrementing allows you to set an exact position and location of edges of your, for example, of your model, so that it suits nicely to other modular parts, for example. So the last thing that we have here on the list is the tool called proportional editing. What it does, if you enable that, it works at the toggle button. So if you enable that, now for example, move an object or scale it or rotate that, it will show a gray circle. Everything that is inside of this gray circle will also move depending on its position closer to the center. So basically right now nothing moves, but when I hold the monkey hand for now, I still didn't drop it, and I see this circle. If I rotate the mouse wheel, as I increase that, as you can see, far enough, all the nearest objects also start moving depending on their position closer to the center. Yeah, as you can see right now, it is probably the limit where they start their movement. Once again, in layout, it may not be as needed, as important as, for example, in modeling. Because in modeling, you would like to probably would want to move a specific point on a mesh and drag out other points on some, let's say, to smooth the edges or smooth the vertices of this newly created part here of this extracted mesh. For example, here next to this option, we have a drop down where we can select a function which will be applied to our movement. So for now it's smooth, everything will be smoothed out. We can make it look as a sphere, so basically all the nearest vertices, all the nearest components that we would like to move will get to the shape of this function that we have here selected. So after using that, remember to switch it off in order not to forget and not to spoil some things. So for now, this is it concerning the tools in layout. Of course, they are not all of them, but concerning some basic stuff, the most basic functionalities, this is probably it. So for now, I would advise you to look through once again what I've shown, play around with it, try out those functions and see how do they work in order for you to feel comfortable before we go to the modeling phase, which will be in the next video. So if you found this video any helpful or interesting, give a like, post a comment, and of course subscribe. So thank you for watching and see you in the next video.